Did you know that Google personalizes many searches by city and Also Asked is the only tool to access live People Also Asked data at city level? Try for free at alsoasked.com.
Tired of SEO guesswork? Quadra's AI agent goes deeper to uncover high-impact optimizations and completes hours of SEO in minutes. Get started now.
I was going to say that SEO with Fat Joe is as peaceful as this, but then the birds are all having fights.
Hello, so I'm Mehtab. Hope you guys have been well. So today I wanted to pick a subject that everybody loves, which is obviously data, right? And I picked a format in trying to explain based in a real life scenario that I went through rather than something that is like more case study like, if you will. So essentially, what I want to go through is how I was able to turn around a customer or a client that was super against data in the terms of like how they can take the steps in making something better from there, and turn them around and actually saying, okay, look, I can make the changes here. It makes sense. Like, let's move forward. So that's the LinkedIn picture that I was talking about earlier on. So essentially, we all know that there's power in data. We all talk about it day in, day out, and the importance of it. Sometimes it's difficult to get that across somebody that's higher up in the board of directors, for example, or whatever. So essentially, I wanted to talk about how removing the guesswork out of data is a lot easier than people might seem. There's a lot of visual tools that you can use. So using guesswork versus data is a piece. Essentially, I like to use different kinds of tools to allow myself to visualize the data in a way that people can understand no matter what kind of background they're from. And then that allows somebody to go around and make a better decision out of it. What we ended up doing here was, before this particular brand that I based this off of, we didn't really have much information coming through that was concise enough. A lot of it was based off of feeling. We think that this is what our audience is. We think that the makeup of our different audience sets are correct. So in my opinion, that was without any clear data because there's a lot of guesswork. And then what we did was bringing in essentially making marketing unpredictable in this way. But with clear data, I was able to make it much easier, especially with actual information there, to convince somebody to say, okay, look, let's add bits in, let's change the creative, let's change the audiences, and even also looking at other factors like websites, right? Landing pages, something that's not really in a paid media person's directory, but it's always something to look at. So essentially, what ended up happening with these guys was just by looking and being as simplified and removing as much red tape as possible, we were able to reduce or increase the return on investment in terms of budget efficiency by 15.18%. That's a quarter of somebody's budget that you're spending less, but getting the same amount of revenue as you did in the previous term. And this is a yearly, by the way. So how do we do that? So refining how we tracked and used the insights, using financial metrics, we focused on really simple key areas. So one being CPA, everybody knows CPA quite easily. How much does it cost us to win a customer? Link CTR, I personally use link CTR a lot more versus CTR as a segment, mainly because I know in performance advertising, you want them to go from platform to landing page and then actually do something valuable on the landing page. So making sure that The creative is grabbing the right attention, the right emotional buy that you need to make them make that decision in that time window that you want. And if it's not going to be at that season or session, then using a different line of creative in a different audience set to do that same relevant action. So initially, we had an average link click-through rate of 0.90% in terms of everything that we're pumping to the ad account. And by using simple tools, we're able to bring it to an average of 2.34%. This is quite a big increase. There was a lot of investment taken in terms of like the creative input from the client side. However, to actually make the change of saying, let's just make more creative that's worthwhile rather than just going with our gut feeling, this is how we changed it essentially. So the last bit is revenue efficiency, understanding are we spending like smartly or are we just spending for the hell of spending, right? I found it with massive budgets, a lot of people would just put it together, let's get it out there, and then we'll run it as we go along. Usually you don't need that much data to understand when things need to be changed, especially when it comes down to creative or audiences. It's just about displaying that in a way that your stakeholders would go back and say, okay, I can make that change immediately, or it's worth me doing that. So user experience metrics that I like to follow personally. When we look at behavior, I usually look at time on site. So again, in my experience in working at agencies as a paid social director or paid media director, nobody really talks about this metric, especially when it comes through a specific campaign. But for me, it's all about relevancy, right? Nobody is going to spend 15, 20 minutes on a website if they don't want to be there, right? And if they're spending a minute or two, then you know that there's probably a little bit less relevancy there. So we could make some adjustments in the actual audience targeting or the creative. Rage clicks and bounce rates. These are something that I think has been around for a really long time, but it's good to understand whether it is the landing pages that you're using, the specific campaign landing pages, like, are they intuitive for that customer that you want to produce? And then user flow. A lot of people would pinpoint the drop-off, but I also look at like the people who've completed the journey, find out what was similar between all the people that went from start to finish, and then like what were the similarities between those people, and then same with the drop-off. Now, audience targeting is something that everybody has their kind of own way of doing. A lot of people now are using, for example, on Facebook or Meta, sorry. You have Advantage Plus audiences where you're allowed to use machine learning, and some people like to feed that with a massive set of audiences. Some people like me just leave it empty and allow it to be seasoned via the pixel. But whatever the case is, it's always good to make sure that you're always shaping around first-party data as best as you can, especially as we go into the future of harder and harder targeting restrictions. Retargeting to a warm audience is something that everybody thinks is important, which it is, but it's about doing it right. I find a lot of ad accounts that I've come across have retargeting campaigns that are super duper expensive. And then that is mainly due to the fact that either the pools are too small and the frequency is too high, or the creative is just not strong enough to make that emotional conviction to say, okay, I want to buy it now. What I find, especially in luxury fashion, for example, there's it might sound a little bit crazy, but there's actually a payday window. So like how normal retail would work, but especially in luxury, we end up finding that, okay, when the average payday window starts coming, you're going to start seeing all these remarketing ads work. So then it's about, time spacing. Can we run the ads at a different point in the year, or at a different point in the day, or in the month? So built lookalikes from the best customers. So this is something a little bit more in-depth that I like to do. Instead of just building simple lookalike audiences based off of an entire customer list, I'll pick out the key audience, right? The guys who have been able to jump through super quickly, super easily, and they've had an actual decent order value. whatever their similarities are is what I want more of, essentially, because they're essentially the easiest guys. But also looking at those guys, building up some kind of visual representation on what they like, what their interests are, what their behaviors are, and then building creative to match that. Here we go. So essentially, with all that being said, what was the result? Overall, we had a lower CPA, we had better engagement, and we had clearer performance engagement. Now, what is the value of the CPA? We were hitting an average of almost 1,000 SAR per purchase before doing any of this. So for context, the brand is based in Saudi Arabia, but it was internationally being sold. So SAR is the local currency that we're using. But 1,000 SAR is almost like 300 pounds. So it's super expensive for not a lot of, your margins have to be huge to be able to afford something like that, especially if you're buying a dress. So the best, but by using these simple practices, which a lot of you guys probably know, allowed me to go from 1,000 SAR as an average to just 300 in an instant. And then as we continued to get better tracking match data through the Pixel and through Conversions API, we got it down into 50 SAR or 60 SAR, and it might fluctuate depending on what's going on. And to give you an idea, that's like a couple of quid at that point, right? So when you're a business that's spending so much money on your average purchases, and then now you're like, within a couple of weeks, you're much lower just by simply following data that's easier or is more intuitive. One of the biggest issues with this particular brand that I'm talking about is that their website sucked. It was terrible, right? And again, as somebody that's in paid media, usually we don't look at this. Like, our journey ends once the campaign is going and we just look in the platform. But the conversion ratio is super low, right? And obviously, if anyone, most of you guys are probably agency side as well, the client's going to come back to you and is like, why are you wasting my money, man? And I had a really difficult time explaining to them that, hey man, our time on site's pretty good. Our average link click-through rate on the platform is really, really good. And people are genuinely engaging. There's add to cart volumes happening, but they're just not purchasing. So what's going on? I use a tool called Hotjar. Anybody here use Hotjar before? There you go. So you guys all know that it's super easy to use, and it's free for a certain amount of visits that you get. But essentially, it gives you 3 different maps in terms of heat maps. You get the click map, the move map, and the scroll map. And what each one does is essentially the click maps. The click maps help me show where somebody's clicking. Move map shows me where they're moving. So one of the things, we all shop here online sometimes. Move your scroll across the catalog, and you kind of get an idea. Let me look at the pictures here. Let me, do I like this color or not? Or I want a different angle. That gives me an idea of intent and engagement. So how long does a person go through their journey before they get bored? And they're just doom scrolling at that point. They're just trying to find something that's going to interest them. And then the scroll map here just allows me to get an idea as a holistic view of where the dead end is, essentially. Now, what helped me decide, what to optimize, essentially, was the creative segment, the landing pages, and then the audiences. So between those 3 things, one of them really is directly in my control. 2 of them are depending on what the client will prefer to do, what their personal abilities are, and what their personal biases are. I had to visualize this information and give them a better clue on what they need to invest in before CFO comes down and starts getting really angry, right? The way I solved the creative testing is I use something called Motion App. Anyone use Motion App? Really? Oh, there you go. Liam used Motion App. There you go. I love this tool. It's actually super duper cheap, and it gives you a better idea on more detailed insights in different types of creative that you use both organically and on a paid side. So when we tested creative, we were all looking at performance details, so looking at A/B testing, which everybody does, but also looking at emotional impact, especially when you're in an e-commerce segment. How much emotion can the creative carry through to the landing page to then make that person buy, right? And then scroll speed. How quick does somebody scroll through the creative? If it's an instant experience or if it's something similar to that, if it's super, super fast, they're just going through it. It's probably not worth it. So, you can make those decisions later on in different ways. Watch time is something that we all look at, but also quality of watch time. If it's someone that's actually watching through like plus 75% of the video or the segment, and it's a fairly long, let's say 3 to 5 minute long video, then obviously you've got somebody that's interested in you. But you want to know why, like what was the hook at that point? So motion was one of the big reasons why I was able to get my average CTR from 0.90 to 2.34. Purely because I could understand why my creative was working better than the ones that didn't, and then we'll allow the creative team who actually know how to take a picture to go and give that to me. Budget optimization is something that is incredibly important. Facebook has released many different tools over the past to test. Remember when CBOs came into effect and everybody was torn either it was a great thing or it was a terrible thing. But for me, spending less was obviously most important. It's not my dog, it's the designer's dog, but they so we ended up reducing our overall budget by 15.18%, but we matched the same revenue as the previous year, purely because we got our targeting correct, we got our creative correct, and I was able to visualize why their website sucked. So it wasn't just my personal preference of saying like, hey guys, you got a bad website. So cut out the waste and focus on only what is working, right? Very simple technique. Everybody probably thinks, hey man, this is no-brainer. But when you're sitting there in front of the client and you've got like 7 other people that have no idea about any of this, sometimes reducing the complications is easier than adding some mumbo jumbo in there. Landing page optimizations is something that we spoke about earlier on. But creative and targeting weren't the only levers for us, because we knew our creative was good, our targeting was good, because the in-platform stats that were coming in were really solid. But it's just, everybody just died after 5 minutes into the landing page. So we're like, what's going on, man? Like, please buy my stuff. So redesign the landing pages based on real-time behavior, which I showed you on Hotjar. Hotjar also do screen recordings, which is really good if you're allowed to take them in your region. But that gives you a visual idea of like what each session looks like. So we got a richer previews. We removed it from friction. Optimized content blockers by essentially removing them if there were any. And then that was our starting point here. So BrandX is the brand that we've been referring to today. Low conversions due to poor audience insights, but with stronger CTR, stable CPMs, it was all on the site essentially. Like we knew that our platform was solid. Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, and Pinterest were performing really, really well, and we had enough budget for the market. It was just that what was going on the site was bringing us down. So data tracking overhaul was done when we implemented full tracking, which is crazy to think that nobody had, like some people are still out there that don't have full conversion tracking. We were able to integrate Facebook's conversion API, but we were able to do it with a higher match rate. So instead of getting a 5 out of 10, we were getting an 8 as a minimum. And then visual data, changing the minds of our heads in the business. And then what finally convinced the client was Hotjar. That information was the clearest point where they could not argue with me anymore to say that, hey man, it's not like your ads or your strategy, it's probably our website. So essentially, at that point, I knew I won them, and it was just about getting them to actually make the investment going forward. Man, this clicker is really doing wonders today, I'll tell you that. So, as we spoke about the people rage clicking and the hesitation, they kept asking me, can we target better? My answer to that was, if the clicker will let me, How do we fix this experience? Because the experience is everything towards targeting. Results in ROI. We had 85% reduction in CPA, as I discussed earlier on, which was huge, right? Like imagine you coming in and give you 85% off right away. 2.34% on our average link click-through rate. Stable revenue, which was finally something that they were really struggling with because we were spending so much money everywhere else. So educating the client was a big part of it. Spreadsheets were really difficult. They didn't want to understand it. That's why we used the different tools over there. We focused on visual storytelling and user behavior to build the trust from the client side to actually then service what their consumer was at that point. So what can you do today? Audit your tracking, make sure tracking works, even if it's not your site. Sometimes it's worth being that guy to make that change. Creative test, read the results and remove the bias on your own opinion. That's why using motion allows you to do that. And then Hotjar, as we spoke about, validates the quality of your funnel, but actually visually helps you to make those changes. So there you go. That was my experience. If anyone has any questions, you can find me at some point later on. And good luck with this, because Liam was definitely not exaggerating about the clicker. So there you go. Thank you.